Welcome back to me reading Transported, a Wings of Fire story, fanfiction. This time, sweet chapter 17. As usual, if this is your first time watching this little series, I recommend you to watch the previous chapters or read them yourself. Now let's begin. This chapter's name is Hurricane Warning. Daniel had been walking for quite a while now. His wings had given out on him after a long while of flying and refused to get him off the ground for more than 30 seconds. It was strange feeling to him. It was a strange feeling to him, having sore wings. It was also quite ironic, considering he was a skywing. He was a skywing after all. The supposed tribe with the most flying speed. All of his energy from flying had finally caught up with him, and he was unable to do anything about it. Honestly, he had it coming to him. He was reckless with his flying skills, and it wore him out slowly. And now he was paying the price of not being able to fly at all, at the one time where he needed to fly the most out of his entire time here so far. Well, it's fine. I'll just walk for a bit and then take off again later, Daniel thought to himself. It did little to reassure him that all would be all right, but he did feel slightly better. At the moment, he was climbing up a large sand dune in hopes of getting a better view of the world around him. Step after step, he kept walking. His endurance on land was not as great as his endurance in the sky, and as such, was having a difficult time just walking straight, especially in a place as hot as the scorching Sand Kingdom. His thoughts didn't help much either. He had recently found himself constantly worrying about Winter and how he was doing, as well as the rest of the gang. Also, a prophecy hadn't left his mind. He still needed to reach the border soon. It had been at least 3 days since they left Jade Mountain Academy. They could have been there by now. Except I just had to be an idiot and run off, Daniel sighed. They're probably not even there anymore. Went back to Jade Mountain Academy, most likely, so they wouldn't get muddled up in my problems. He didn't know for sure, of course, which is why he was flying back. However, he needed to think of a plan in case they really had left. All right. Well, if the map's there, then I'm able to continue on my own, Daniel strategized. However, if they did end up taking it away with them, then I may have a slight issue. The sand crunched underneath his talons. He was nearly at the top of the dune. Although he didn't notice, as thoughts were still zooming around in his head. And if by chance they're still there, I owe them a massive explanation, Daniel thought worriedly. He didn't know which option was worse at this point, except that this one explanation could probably break their minds. First, it'll be about why I ran off. First, it will be about why I ran off. Then about Charlotte being trapped in this world. Then about me not being an actual dragon, or from this universe to begin with. And finally, them finding out about them not being real. Both options were really bad, as he desperately needed them to help him. But if he was to tell them what they really were, just ink on paper, who knows how they might react. Soon, Daniel reached the top of the dune. Huge bundles of golden sand and dirt outstretched in all directions before him, although the cave was still nowhere to be seen. Great. I'm totally lost, Daniel thought. Daniel stared down at his talons. He could see the ripples of heat in the air around him. His body was lacking fluids. He was dehydrated. Weak. Suddenly, his ears perked as he heard talking in the not too far off distance. He looked down towards the ground to see two medium-sized sandwings. They weren't. Weren't. No, we love typos here. They make us laugh. Weren't as large as fully grown dragons, as Daniel had seen, but they were definitely older than he was. Maybe they'd be 18 in human years, or 6 in dragon years, Daniel analyzed. Both dragons were arguing with each other. They had black hoods around their heads and back. However, he realized it was only designed to cover the face of the user, as the neck and rest of the body was still exposed. Images of dragon skull tattoos were marked on each of the dragon's neck. Strange. If I remember correctly from the books, Vulture had marks on his neck, representing each dragon he'd ever killed, although I don't remember any other dragons having the same marks. Maybe I should stick around to see what they are up to. If they're related to Vulture in any way, then eavesdropping on their plans could prove quite useful. Okay, first rule of eavesdropping: don't get caught. Daniel lowered himself to take cover behind the dune. The heat was slightly uncomfortable. However, he was able to endure it, for now at least. The other sandwings didn't seem to know he was there, which was a good sign. A very, very good sign. Listen, one of them yelled. If we come back empty-handed to the scorpion den, we're going to receive one hell of a beating. He'll go on for hours, and we'll never hear the end of it. Yeah, I know, but what do you expect us to do here? It's the desert, for crying out loud. What does he expect us to find? Diamonds? I know what you're saying, but we have to think of something. From what Daniel could hear, they were bandits / assassins, working for Vulture, most likely, and were sent out here to grab something. Although, now that Daniel thought about it, the Sandwing did have a point. Why would he send someone out to the desert, of all places? Daniel couldn't help but snort out a laugh behind the cover of the dune at how ridiculous the situation was. I mean, what are they doing? Searching for buried treasure? Daniel laughed. Hey! Did you hear that? Said one of the dragons. What do you mean? I didn't hear anything. No. I'm sure I just heard someone laughing. Daniel was covering his snout with both talons, trying his best, his absolute best, to stop himself from laughing again. Sis, you're crazy enough as it is. We don't need you hearing voices. Shut it, Sirocco. Sirocco. Sirocco? Sure. Daniel heard a voice hiss. I'm not crazy. Or, I'm not crazy. Suddenly, it all came back to him. He knew those dragon tattoos, currently in the Scorpion Den. They were no other than Keebly's siblings, Rattlesnake and Sirocco. Yeah, sure you aren't, Sirocco teased. Screw you, Rattlesnake barked. Oh, I'm sure you'll be doing plenty of that back at home, Sirocco responded silently, which discerningly earned him a loud slap across the face from Rattlesnake. Shut up! Sirocco fell to the sand with laughter, while his sister had a crimson face with a mix of anger and a very slight fluster. Daniel had finally managed to gain control and hold in his laughter, and was now back to eavesdropping. 3 moons, focus up already, Rattlesnake demanded. We're going to be so dead if we don't get that map Gramps wants. Daniel's attention was caught up by the word map. Map? What kind of map could they be talking about? Wait. They don't mean. His question was soon answered, however, as Sirocco spoke without warning. Well, what do you want us to do about it? What do you want us to do about it? Sirocco asked. We already went to that dumb Sandwing's house, and he just said he gave it away to a Skywing. Then we followed the tracks to Jade Mountain, which after a while of interviewing and threatening the staff, they finally said he left for the desert with some students. Now we're chasing some random Skywing, and if the rumors are true about his flight speed, then even if we do find him, we'll never catch him. It was a total waste of our time, Sirocco concluded. Not exactly. We did end up learning his name and who he's traveling with. Hurricane, Rattlesnake stated. He's traveling with none other than the Jade Winglet and our dear brother, Keebly. Well then, Sirocco smiled. I think Gramps would like to know this information. Don't you? Rattlesnake nodded. Let's go. They both took off into the sky. They flew above Daniel's head, however, didn't manage to spot him. Quickly seeing his chance, Daniel took off in the opposite direction. He spotted what finally looked like a large cave in the far-off distance and flew towards it. It would take a while to get there, considering his wings were still aching, but he had no choice but to push through it. Soon, a large pain began to spread across his back. The external injuries from his battle with Star seemed to be fully healed. However, internally, he was feeling worse than ever. The breeze whipped past his face as his back continued to sear with pain. His body begged for rest and water, but he couldn't give in. The rest of the group needed to know the severity of the situation they had just gotten themselves into. Vulture wanted Baron's map, and who knew what he might do to get it. Back at the cave, Turtle opened his weary eyes. He had to admit that he did not have a great night's sleep. The sun was high up in the sky when he finally raised his head to look. However, his eyes were met by direct sun rays, which ended up burning his retinas a little. Scanning the interior of the cave, he noticed two things straight off the bat. One, Ghibli was nowhere to be seen, although it was kind of expected, since if he remembered correctly, he was a morning dragon and was probably out flying for a bit. Two, Hurricane's attacker, the hybrid who had been in the cave with them for some time now, was up and walking about. Her wounds still weren't fully healed. This was because Turtle didn't use his healing stone on her, since at the time he was still trying to keep his powers a secret. But everyone knows now about them now, so I could probably fully heal her up now, externally at least. Turtle laughed a little. He had to admit that Hurricane was right. Back at Jade Mountain Academy, when they met in the underground lake, he had told him that spilling his secret would lift the weights off his back. At first, he didn't believe him, but after the events of yesterday, he realized it did. Thank you for persuading me, friend. Of course, the GigaChad protagonist is always right. Although soon, his slight moment of happiness turned into a moment of disappointment and slight sadness. He remembered that Hurricane wasn't with them anymore. Turtle looked at the bracelet he had enchanted to track his current location. It was still in the same place it was the last time he saw it. It wasn't moving. However, and that slightly scared him. In secret, he had also placed a second enchantment on the bracelet in his mind. He enchanted the center black rock on the bracelet to glow, depending on his current condition. For example, it would be normally colored black if everything was fine. However, it would turn red the closer to death Hurricane was, and blue the more danger he was in. Honestly, he had just thought of the enchantment in the heat of the moment and couldn't perfect it. Now that I perfect many of my not that I perfect many of my spells anyways, Turtle thought glumly. Either way, however, he was able to see his current situation, and if by any chance things were really bad, the stone would start flashing between the two colors. He did, however, find it strange that he was even this worried in the first place. Maybe it's because he was the first person to ever stand up for me. His mind spoke as a picture of the scene in the underground lake returned to him. It was kind of shocking at first. When he first entered the cave with his sister, Turtle immediately thought it was just another dragon who would end up ignoring him, like everyone else did. He certainly did not expect him to turn down an enemy's request to be friends with him. She would only choose certain dragons based on their skills to be friends with, and most of the time didn't care much about them. However, she seemed kind of annoyed when he turned down her offer. Even after saying she was an animus, he didn't care. It's almost like he saw right through her. He saw what she was, just a wolf in sheep's clothing. Turtle shook his head slightly. He shouldn't be thinking like that. I mean, sure, she was indeed a bad dragon. Ha ha ha, like how Hurricane described her. He let out a small chuckle. He still found it baffling how Hurricane turned down an extremely rare opportunity to be friends with an enemy, and then insulted her behind her back after she had made fun of Turtle. He simply didn't care, and that's what he liked about him. It didn't matter who they were, or what powers or tribe they were from. He would simply speak his mind, even if it would get him into a lot of trouble sometimes. Another picture of the escape he made from Jade Mountain Academy a few days ago came to mind. It was honestly impressive how he managed to outclass the entire school and the teachers, especially when they were all trying to catch him, and they're trying to kill him too. Whatever happened, one thing could be said. Even if we only officially met a little while ago, he's still one of my best friends. The only dragon who ever stood up to an enemy, and probably the only dragon in Pyrea who doesn't care about power or status. So, what am I doing? Turtle yelled internally, now taking a proper look at the stone on the bracelet. It was a dark shade of navy blue, meaning Hurricane was in danger, and all he was doing was sitting around in a cave while his friend was out there, in possible need of his help. He suddenly got a boost of energy to get up. He picked up the bracelet and was about to run out of the cave when a talon grabbed his arm. He turned to see the hybrid holding him tightly in place. She was staring into his eyes. It wasn't a menacing stare. However, it was definitely unsettling. Where are you going? She asked calmly, still maintaining eye contact. Nowhere? Turtle said. He looked down at the talon she gripped his forearm with. Foreleg. It was still stained red from Hurricane's blood. This only made Turtle want to run out of the cave faster. He'd completely forgotten that Hurricane left when he still wasn't fully healed, at least not internally. He shrugged nervously. A small part of his mind feared that he would be departing this world in the next minute or so. Where's Keebly? Turtle asked, his composure slowly melting away as Star continued to stare deep into his soul. She inched closer to her just as the last of Turtle's composure had left his body. His heart was pounding against the walls of his chest uncontrollably. Suddenly, Star's eyes went wide, and she let go of his arm, looking a little guilty. Sorry, I was being intimidating again, wasn't I? Star said. Huh? Turtle responded, a little puzzled. I was taught outclaw skills by some good friends in the past, and as such, sometimes become a little intimidating when talking to others. Oh, I see, said Turtle, calming down a little and taking back his quiet composure. Yeah, it's why I don't have many friends, Star said, scratching the back of her neck with a claw before wincing at the sun pain from an exposed cut that she didn't know was there. You okay? Turtle asked, slightly worried about her sun pain. Yeah, just a cut that I didn't know about, Star said, trying to shrug off the pain. But when a small trickle of navy blood painted her yellow scales once more, she started to panic again. Hey, don't worry, I can help, Turtle asked, reaching into his bag for his enchanted healing stone. Oh, all right, Star replied, a little skeptical by what Turtle meant by help. However, her skepticism soon turned to confusion when he pulled out a small smooth stone. Sorry to burst your bubble, but I don't see how a stone is going to help out with a gash on the back of my neck. We'll see, Turtle grinned. He walked around to Star's backside and gently placed the stone on the bleeding gash. Where are you? Star started. However, soon she was cut. She shut herself up as she felt the pain slowly disappear off her scales. The rock worked its magic, literally, and soon the only trace of the cut ever being there was a small trickle of blue blood still present on some of her scales. However, the cut itself no longer existed. Turtle took the stone off her neck and walked back to talk to her, gripping the rock tightly in his talon before placing it back inside his bag. Star had a curious face as Turtle walked back to talk. What was that? She asked as she vigorously rubbed the back of her neck, only to find that the gash had simply been rubbed out of existence. She looked down at her talons, expecting to see blue, but only saw light stains spread from her and Hurricane's fight. Star turned her attention back to Turtle and expected an answer, to which he replied, I'm an animus. A shy smile crept across his face as he said that, partly because he was still slightly worried about how people may react. Oh, well, that explains a lot, Star said, before she walked down to her corner and sat down. This was far from the reaction Turtle had expected. She wasn't surprised or scared, and didn't really care much for it at all. Well, I think she and Hurricane will get along very well, especially considering they have so much in common, like not caring about stuff like this. He laughed quietly for a second. Sometimes foreshadowing can be relatively obvious. He laughed quietly for a second. He was just finishing up his thought when he realized he still had a question to ask her. Hey, Turtle started. However, he also noticed that he hadn't learned her name yet. Sorry. What's your name? A small feeling of awkwardness settled around him. She looked up from the ground to meet his eyes. Oh, right, crap. I haven't told you my name yet. Sorry. I'm not used to introducing myself since I'm alone most of the time. She smiled. Name's Star. Pleased to meet you. Turtle returned the smile before introducing himself. Hello, Star. Well, hello, Star. Turtle, at your service. He gave an overextended royal bow. However, it backfired and ended up falling flat on his face and came face to face with Star's front talons. Wow, Star said as she looked down on the fallen turtle. If this is normal, then I should introduce myself more often. Turtle looked up at her and laughed a little. Well, not really. That was just me being clumsy. Star watched as he got up on all fours again to look a little more distinguished. A slight red patch had appeared on his forehead where he hit the ground, but he paid no attention to it. So, I was going to ask, Turtle said. Star looked up at him, indicating she was paying attention. You said that you didn't have many friends. That's correct, Star said, her face slightly drooping, but it wasn't noticeable. But you also said that some friends once taught you outclaw skills. So I'm curious. Where are they? Turtle asked, scanning Star's face closely. She looked from him to the ground. This time, her sadness was very noticeable, but she refused to answer his question. However, Turtle got the message. Oh, Turtle said, realization hitting him. I'm so sorry. He didn't exactly know how to respond to this, so without thinking straight, his impulses caused him to wrap his wings around her. Star tensed up a little, but soon hugged him back. Thanks. I needed that, Star said before she parted the hug. No problem, Turtle smiled. Friends? He offered a talon to her, in possible hope she would accept it. Star took the talon with her own. Friends, she repeated, looking down at her blood-stained talon before adding, I should probably wash this off somehow, quickly letting go of Turtle's talon. Agreed, Turtle interjected. However, they didn't have much time to react before the sound of landing talons echoed behind them. Turning around, they saw a yellow sandwing with a dark black cloak standing in the center of the cave entrance. The cloak covered the face of the dragon, so they were unable to tell who it was, and more importantly, whether they were friendly or not. Star immediately got up and began to growl at the intruder, raising her spiked and barbed tail in a defensive position. Turtle got up to stand by her. He didn't know who would want to bother a bunch of dragonettes, but he had to admit that they all looked like they were looking for trouble. Whoa, 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 calm down, Star. A familiar voice echoed from the cloaked dragon, who raised their talons in the air in an attempt to calm the situation. How do you know my name? She snarled at the intruder in front of them. However, Turtle noticed a strange black device strapped to the dragon's forearm. It appeared to be some sort of black box. However, upon closer inspection from afar, he noticed there was a blade sticking out of it. An Assassin's Creed blade. Ha ha ha. And it was drenched in blood. Now, he was also scared. Whoever this was had just come back from killing someone. His eyes shot open. Keebly wasn't in the cave this morning. What if something happened to him? Or more specifically, what if this dragon did something? Answer me! Star bellowed. Okay. Just chill out, the cloaked dragon said. Slowly, the mysterious dragon raised one of their talons as they grabbed the tip of the hood and pulled it down so Turtle and Star could see their identity. A sudden rush of relief and confusion crashed over both of them as they stared at the dragon's face. It was Keebly. However, Turtle's relief then turned to worry as he noticed that it was his friend who had the bloody blade attached to his forearm. The hidden blade from Assassin's Creed. We love pop culture references in our fanfictions. Keebly had a face of worry, and he seemed slightly traumatized, as if he had just witnessed something horrible. Keebly, Turtle said in a shaky voice. What happened? He turned to look at Storm next to him, who also had the same expression of fear and confusion painted across her face. He turned to look at Keebly, who still had a scared face on, the bloody blade still exposed and dripping on the cold cave floor. Look, I can explain. At least, I think I can. Almost as if on cue. The rest of the dragons began to awake at the worst possible moment in time. How convenient for the plot. Turtle and Keebly stared at each other for a small moment, both of their eyes yelling the same phrase. Oh no. King Kajal yawned. Good morning. Holy cow, why do you have a blade, Keebly? Wait, don't freak out. Keebly, what are you holding? Moon yelled from his side. Wait, what? We love typos here. They're funny. Wait. Is the word the his like referring to Keebly, or is this just a typo that's referring to Moon? I don't know. But I'm still going to laugh at it either way. Moon yelled from his side. She was staring at a small puddle of blood droplets, which had formed by Keebly's talons. Okay, just calm down. I can explain. However, things only got worse, as just as that moment, Pearl and Winter woke up. Winter opened his eyes to see the commotion, to see what the commotion was all about. Oh, my moon. Can't you guys just let a dragon sleep for once? He stopped at his words when he laid eyes on Keebly. Keebly, Winter said dangerously. What did you do? Keebly took a step back. His heart couldn't calm down, and his body was trembling. Pearl walked behind everyone to take a look at the situation. When she spotted Keebly's bloody blade, she froze. Her stance tensed up. Her stance tensed a little, but she kept silent. Look, guys, look, I know this looks bad. I know that sounds bad. Keebly started. You think? Winter bellowed. You have a bloody knife on you. Did you kill someone? Now everyone had tensed up. The thought of Keebly killing another dragon had them all worried. No, I didn't. Well, I don't think I did, at least, Keebly said, remembering his dead mother on the streets of the Scorpion Den. You don't think you killed anyone? Pearl said skeptically. What is that supposed to mean? I don't know how to explain it, Keebly yelled, a few tears forming in his eyes. He was so scared of himself, that he was crying. Winter, however, didn't seem to care, or even notice, for that matter. Well, you better have a pretty damn good explanation. Or, no, he didn't say damn, but we'll keep moving. Winter screamed, a mix of fear and anger within his words. Everyone looked towards Keebly, except for Turtle, who was now breathing heavily. His eyes had made their way to an enchanted bracelet. The center rock was flashing red and blue, and paired with the sudden appearance of Keebly and his blood-soaked blade, a thought had come to Turtle. No, he wouldn't, Turtle thought. Right? He looked back at Keebly. However, everyone's thoughts were interrupted when a bright red dragon came barreling into the cave from the sky. Oh, moons! Pearl yelled as she leapt over the dragon. The dragon had touched the small puddle of blood droplets, which left a small smear of red as they skipped to a stop in the center of the room. All eyes were on the red skywing, and there was no mistaking who it was. A tired hurricane had crashed into the cave. His chest was rising up and down rapidly. With what seemed like the last of his strength, he looked up at all of them and said something that made them all shudder before he collapsed. Guys, we have a problem! Hello, everyone. That is the end of the chapter, except Or, as usual, the author's note at the very bottom. Hello, everyone. Another chapter has been released. In parentheses. Finally! Close parentheses. Sorry if it was mainly filler. I need to get Hurricane/Daniel back to the group and didn't want to do a time skip. Open parentheses. Since I don't want my story to be filled with them. Close parentheses. So a little filler was needed. Open parentheses. Sorry. Close parentheses. I'll try to release the next chapter soon. But no promises. And you. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back. Or I'll be back. Eventually. So, filler for the gaggle fuck of a group that Daniel is with. I mean, it's sort of weird about how is the gaggle fuck of a group keep on like praising him like so fucking much. Like, I know it's like normal, but like when you read so many fan fictions, like you kind of you see like the worst ones where it's just glazing the OC. Like, he's the main character. He knows everything. He can never do something wrong. And it's like, eventually, when you read so many, you read all the bad ones, and then you're like, no. It's like PTSD. But I think it's doing it decently here. Not sure. There are some crazy moments, but like, overall, it's pretty good. So, see you next time.